this it? That one, right? Thanks, everyone. It's a real honor to be here, and with my new daughter. So, Paddington bear. I'm sure most of you here have heard of Paddington bear. Everyone here of Paddington bear? Yes. And if you haven't heard of the book, you've probably heard of the movie that just came out, Paddington. But I wanted to share with you what the real Paddington is like. Charismatic, funny, likes to play, likes to relax, similar to the movie. But the reality is there's less than 5,000 bears left in South America and in the world due to habitat fragmentation, agriculture, and illegal land trafficking and poaching. So what this is doing is it's not providing access to certain key areas for these bears, and they're actually starving to death. But with all of your help here, we can help keep bears like this little cub Martina alive for the future and in the wild. Unfortunately, we know so little about their ecology, and they're called spectacle bears, but also known as onion bears from the rings around their face. They look like they're wearing glasses. They live from Venezuela all the way down to Bolivia, but this is their typical habitat. It's really dense cloud forest. It's hard to see. Basically, it's like living in a fog. So trying to actually observe them, study them, understand what their needs are, their ecology has been really challenging for many. Luckily, 10 years ago, we found a small population of bears in this very unique endangered ecosystem, the dry forest of northern Peru, which runs the coast of all of Peru. And so luckily, we were able to observe these bears in the wild, and they have these identical facial markings, and so we're able to put names and know which bear is which. So their environment is really extreme, and this is the dry forest. Not what people think of Peru. People think of Machu Picchu and big Amazon. So this isn't somewhere you'd expect to find bears, black bears with lots of fur, and black in particular. But it's not just challenging for them, it's challenging for us. We have no water, we have no food, we have to carry everything in up those big cliffs, and so that's been a tough job for all of us. But the benefit is we have views like this. I mean, we have unlimited visibility, and these bears are living on those rock faces. And I've shown this photo before, but I always want to keep showing it, because when do you see a bear on a cliff like that? That's like Yosemite and climbing people. I mean, and we've never seen them fall. They're trying to get up the cliffs and get things that's a honey. They're trying to get honey, they're trying to get snails. And this is an example of just what their habitat looks like. So I have to say our heart skips a few beats when we're watching this, especially the cubs, 3 months old. You can probably hear our heartbeats in the video if you listen hard enough. So she's trying to get some snails that are in an underhang there. You can see her trying to pull them off. But they do spend a lot of rest and downtime in the day. It's so hot. It goes up to 115 degrees Fahrenheit, and so it's hard for them to move, and it's hard for us to move. So our field staff tend to follow suit with the bears. But we have a couple of oases in this dry forest, and you can see there's a small green dot in the middle, and that's actually a small water hole. That's a fig tree, when there's a little tiny water hole that the bears are using to drink, and it's keeping all of the animals alive in this forest. You can imagine how great that feels. 115, 120 degrees, a couple of liters of water. So in the dry forest, they're actually feeding on two main food sources. This is the Sapote De Fruit. It's a small fruit about the size of an avocado, and it's bright orange on the inside, and it's a thick, it's very similar to an avocado texture. It's high in calories, high in fat. And the great thing about this is as the bears walk through the forest, they're leaving the seed, which is actually regenerating the forest. So they're planting the forest and keeping that endangered, actually it's critically endangered plant alive. Unfortunately, the people and the locals need this wood as well. This is what they're cooking on. And so without this plant, they have no way of cooking. So it's a challenge for conservation. It's a challenge for us. This is another food that they're eating. It's called the Paseo Tree. So you would wonder if they're related to the beaver, but they are not. Although this tree, they eat the entire tree. They don't just eat the bark around it. They eat the entire tree. And it looks like that when they're finished. Just absolutely destroyed. So here's a quick video, just so you can see how hard it is. This is a cub. The mom has already opened up the tree for her, and she's just pulling bits and pieces out as she can. Could you imagine that in that kind of heat, a dry piece of wood for lunch? And this is their winter food, and the sapote is their summer food. So this is what they're eating all year round, other than those snails. So you can see why it's worth going down those cliffs to try to get a little snail. The great thing about the sapote, or the paseo tree, as you can see, even though it's been completely destroyed by the bears, it actually starts growing again. So they're not destroying the forest. What we've really struggled with the last 10 years is land trafficking. That's been a huge problem for us, and you can see in this photo, this is just outside of our conservation center. The land mafias have been stealing land, dividing it up and selling it to people from other regions. So as you can imagine, having our organization there and working with the locals to try to create protected areas is not something they wanted. So 10 years, 8 lawsuits. It's been pretty challenging. And it did get heated for a while when they started killing some of our bears and hanging little bear parts at some of our base camps. So that was a tough time. But I have a great team, as you can see here. So we were able to start a conservation center and start working with the local people and try to protect this area. And I'm happy to say that 2 of the main mafia leaders are in jail for 25 years. So we have enjoyed the last couple of years. Thank you. So in the last couple of years, we've been able to start working more directly with the local community, and we've joined with San Diego Zoo and also Nature and Culture International to work on an education program, working with the schools, trying to replant some of the areas that have been destroyed. And thanks to WCN, we've now been able to move up to the higher elevations and work with the Quechua, which are an indigenous community in the high mountains at about 4,000 meters, so 13,000 feet. So we've been teaching them about bears and getting them engaged into wildlife. And thanks to Shivani and some of her kids' programs with Iwasu Lions, we began an education program with our rescued horses. So we've been bringing, just a few months ago, we actually brought some of the local indigenous people who've never left their communities before down to the dry forest and taught them about the bears in the dry forest, horses, and got them more engaged with some of the rescued animals that we have there. Another really important part of our program has been the Fealty. I'm sure many of you have seen them at the table, and thank you also who have purchased them. But this is an alternative livelihood program, and this is what allows us to work in these areas. But not only that, it's providing some type of income for many of the women who have no jobs and who are able to help educate a few more of their children. So we've been making 6,000 to 8,000 products a year and now getting them into stores and selling them at events like this. We're trying to really promote it for Christmas. And again, thanks to WCN, we were able to move up again into the highlands. So just last month, we started a new workshop with the indigenous women who speak Quechua, not Spanish. So we've had to have a translator. And this is them just making their first little product. So we're hoping this will be successful as we move into new territories. But working with these ladies has allowed us access into this incredible habitat. This is really pristine Paramo that's been untouched, undisturbed by mining, but it's actually under land tenure for mining. So we are working rapidly to try to prevent anything from taking place. So working with the community is essential. And we've been working with them, getting some cameras out just to try to understand what's actually up there. Are there bears? I mean, some of the locals have said they've seen bears, but there's another animal that looks similar to a bear. And then we put a few cameras out, got a couple of shots, and we have now identified a new population of bears. So we're really excited about that. And not only that, we found a mountain tapir, which is an incredible animal, and it's thought that there's only a few hundred left in Peru, so we're really excited that we not only will be protecting bears, but we'll be protecting other species. And I just wanted to throw this in because I think tapirs are so adorable, and this is their little baby with their markings. So unfortunately, after last year's Expo, we all left pumped and positive, but when I got back to Peru, these were the photos we were getting from our camera traps, and we had serious fires. And that's the first time in the high elevation that we have had such a drought, and I'm sure people from California can relate to that. But it just went crazy, and unfortunately the government was not prepared, and they were unable to send any support. So our cameras were melted, and some of our field staff were out there. They worked with the community. We rounded as many people as we could. We actually had over 200 people, got them with shovels, and I mean, we don't have a lot of water, but they started digging, cutting, trying to build breaks between the fires, and we were actually able to put them out, but we did lose 30,000 hectares, so that's a lot of land in a small area. So unfortunately, this is a lot of what our habitat looks like now. And that's a photo from October last year and then November, so just charcoaled. And this is one of the species that's actually related to, it's vaccinium, it's related to the blueberry, and this was an incredible area just covered in blueberries. And so now these bears are looking for new food sources, which has caused retaliatory killings. And that's something we've never had to contend with in the past, but unfortunately this year there's been a number of bears killed. They're leaving this area and they're walking down into the cornfields trying to find anything to eat because they don't have any food now. So we're having to deal with conflict, but at the same time these people need their farm fields and they need to eat as well. So it's always a challenge. And when we thought the fires were over and we could get back to our work and life would carry on, we come back down to our conservation center and an El Nino, a rare El Nino kicks in. Normally we have a year advance, but this was a coastal El Nino, and our conservation center and field site were underwater and our staff housing collapsed. And we lost more camera traps in waterfalls since we put a lot of our camera traps in dry riverbeds. So this is just outside of our conservation center. Unfortunately, people think, well, that's great, at least you have water and there's a drought, and I imagine water for the dry forest is excellent, but in fact, it's not always great, and it's not great for bears. While it looks beautiful and it transforms the landscape, the sapote that I talked about earlier here, you can see that there's a green coating over top of the sapote, and what actually happens is it prevents it from pollinating, and there's no sapote left for the bears to eat. So again, the females aren't able to lactate and feed their cubs, and the cubs either starve to death, or this is a photo of a female just passing saliva to try to keep her cub alive. So it's pretty challenging, and this is what the bears end up looking like. So it's hard to watch. But the good news, everybody here, and with all the support, we can keep these bears alive and in the wild and try to keep this little bear cub that's only 6 weeks living in the wild. We are in desperate need of camera traps, and we need to get out into new areas and try to figure out where these bears are. This is a whole new territory for us dealing with this conflict. They've moved out of the areas that have burned, and we need to find where they are. We need to monitor them, try to understand what's happening up there. And if we're not losing our camera traps to floods and fires, we have these curious bears to contend with that also like to eat camera traps. So this is Marco, the bear. He's too lazy to walk to the camera. Like he's got nothing better to do here. And this is a special camera we got from BBC, a nice SLR camera too, so. So you can see why we need camera traps. But at the same time, we'd really appreciate any support for our Fealty program. If people have any ideas of where we could sell this, or anyone wants to put on any events and try to get them into local stores or sell them for Christmas, we'd really appreciate it. So, and to end on a good positive note, because I know it seemed like one thing after the other of not such amazing news, we have a really amazing news to announce. And this year is the first time that the Peruvian government has put an animal onto the money. It's always been archaeology. And not only did they put an animal on the money, we were able to get them to put Laura, our bear, and also a spectacle bear. So this is a really exciting moment, and we have a couple at our table for purchase as well. And so now we are excited to say that Laura's legacy will live on, at least on the money. And I had to add a photo. This is our next little bear conservation, so That's my daughter, Kalea. Anyways, thanks very much for coming.